The Galactic Council chamber orbited the ancient star of Proxima Centauri, a monument to 10,000 years of peaceful governance. Within its marble halls, representatives from 300 civilizations had gathered for what they believed would be a routine disciplinary action. High Arbiter Velkoth, a towering figure whose crystalline carapace refracted light into prismatic patterns, struck the resonance gong. The chamber fell silent. "The matter before us is humanity," Velkoth announced, his voice carried through neural translators to every species present. "For 2 centuries, we have tolerated their presence. For 2 centuries, they have been difficult." A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembly. The Zacrian hive mind pulsed with irritation. The Matherian cloud beings condensed with obvious displeasure. Ambassador Thres of the Serpentine Dominion slithered to the speaking platform, her scales clicking against polished stone. "Difficult is an understatement, High Arbiter. Humans refuse to share their military technology. They've declined every merger proposal. They maintain a standing fleet despite the Council's protection. They are, in essence, thumbing their primitive noses at 10 millennia of tradition. They also," added Council member XIX of the Silicon Collective, "declined to surrender their system's asteroid belt for mining. They claimed it was strategically important." "The audacity is unprecedented." Velkoth nodded slowly. "And when we sent peacekeepers to occupy Mars as per Protocol 7 Alpha, they, what was the human phrase? Politely but firmly asked us to leave." The chamber erupted in outrage. Species from across the galaxy chittered, roared, hummed, and thought-projected their indignation. For the Council, such defiance was not just unusual, it was incomprehensible. "I move," Velkoth declared, "that we declare enforcement action against humanity. They will submit to Council authority, or they will be removed." The vote was unanimous. 3 days later, the Council's enforcement fleet arrived at the edge of the Sol system, 500 vessels representing the greatest military alliance in galactic history. Never had such force been deployed against a single species. Fleet Commander Zarthon, a veteran of a dozen compliance operations, reviewed the human military assessment with growing confidence. Humanity possessed perhaps 200 ships, their technology barely a century beyond first contact. This would be over in hours. "Open a channel to Earth," he ordered. On the viewscreen, a human appeared. She was small, wearing a simple gray uniform with minimal decoration. Her nameplate read Admiral Rebecca Torres, Sol Defense Command. "Council Fleet," Torres said, her voice unnervingly calm, "you are in violation of the Sol Sovereignty Treaty of 2247. Turn back now." Zarthon's mandibles clicked in amusement. "Admiral Torres, your species has exhausted the Council's patience. Surrender immediately, or face annihilation." Torres leaned back in her chair. "Commander, I need you to understand something. For 200 years, we've played by your rules. We've been diplomatic. Patient. We've honored every treaty, respected every boundary, and declined every fight. Your point? We did that because we're merciful," Torres said, and something in her eyes made Zarthon's confidence flicker. "Not because we're weak." Zarthon cut the transmission. "All vessels, assume attack formation. Target their homeworld orbital defenses." The fleet advanced. Then humanity showed them why mercy had been the wiser choice. The first indication something was wrong came when Zarthon's sensors officer reported an anomaly. "Sir, I'm detecting gravitational distortions throughout the system." "Dozens of them." "No, hundreds. They're everywhere." "Source?" "Unknown. They're not matching any stellar phenomena. It's almost like space folded." From nowhere and everywhere simultaneously, human ships emerged. But these weren't the modest defense craft the Council had observed. These were something else entirely, massive vessels that seemed to phase in and out of normal space, their hulls black as the void itself, bristling with weapons the Council had no classification for. Torres's voice broadcast across every Council frequency. "You're wondering where these ships came from. The answer is simple, they've always been here. Cloaked. Watching. Waiting. The Council fleet counted 200 human ships. They were now staring at 2,000. Every trading vessel we sent to your worlds, Torres continued, was also a weapons platform. Every diplomatic station we built in neutral space was also a forward operating base. Every cultural exchange, every single interaction we've had with the Council for 2 centuries, was reconnaissance. Zarthon felt something he hadn't experienced in 3 decades of military service: fear. We knew this day might come, Torres said. Humans study history, Commander. We know how empires treat those who refuse to kneel. So while we smiled and traded and attended your endless ceremonies, we prepared. One of the human ships, a Leviathan that dwarfed even the Council's flagship, moved forward. Its hull opened to reveal a weapon that made Zarthon's tactical AI crash trying to calculate the energy requirements. That, Torres explained, is a stellar compression cannon. It can create a miniature supernova. We have 50 of them positioned throughout this system. We also have quantum-entangled warheads that can ignore SHIELD's AI-guided swarms that can dismantle ships at the molecular level, and something we call a chronological displacement field that, well, you don't need the details. This is impossible, Zarthon whispered. Your technology was assessed. We showed you what we wanted you to see. Did you really? Think a species that went from powered flight to walking on their moon in 66 years suddenly slowed down their innovation? We didn't stop advancing, Commander. We just stopped showing you. The Council fleet's formation was collapsing. Ships that had never faced a real threat in centuries were attempting to retreat, only to find human vessels already blocking their escape routes. Here's what's going to happen, Torres said, her voice hard as neutronium. You're going to return to the Council and tell them the truth. Humanity didn't refuse to share our technology because we were stubborn. We refused because you weren't ready for it. We didn't maintain a fleet because we didn't trust your protection. We maintained it because we knew eventually you'd do exactly this. She leaned forward. We've been merciful, Commander. We've played the role of the junior species, the newcomers who should be grateful for a seat at the table. But make no mistake, we tolerated the Council, not the other way around. What are your demands? Zarthon asked, his voice barely functioning. Demands? None. But here's what you're going to do. You're going to go home. You're going to tell the Council that the Sol system is off limits. Permanently. And you're going to remember that mercy is a choice, not a weakness. Torres made a gesture, and the human fleet parted, creating a corridor through their formation. You have 6 hours to leave our space. After that, we stop being merciful. The Council fleet retreated in chaos, their legends of invincibility shattered in a single afternoon. They had come expecting to discipline a stubborn child and discovered a sleeping dragon instead. In the Council chamber, when Velkoth received Zarthon's report, he asked the question that would haunt galactic politics for generations: if they had this capability for 2 centuries, why didn't they use it? Why didn't they conquer us? The answer, when it finally came from Earth, was simple and terrifying in its implications: because that's not who we are. But never mistake mercy for weakness again. The Council learned that day what humanity had known since before they reached the stars: the most dangerous species isn't the one that seeks war, but the one that can win it and chooses peace instead. Until you give them no other choice.